Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to Rasmussen Report's reality check. And we have a heck of a reality check for you today. We have numbers you're not going to see anywhere else tonight, a topic that I don't think anybody's polled on. And the big topic we're going to dive into is immigration. And we have our first guest, a special guest from Numbers USA. We're going to try something a little bit different with our interviews. We're going to try and bring you the experts that'll give you an opinion that you won't see anywhere else. And this is one that's coming deep from within the think tank realm within the Beltway of Washington, D.C. And so you're going to get a very different perspective tonight on the topic of immigration and specifically illegal immigration. And we're going to go into crosstabs on birthright citizenship, which is a really hot topic now, and maybe even explore what got us here. The economic collapse of the middle class. This is our longtime sponsors, Numbers USA, great organization. I'll let him explain the organization, but they're a nonpartisan 501c3 in Washington, D.C., and they're focused on immigration. And this is our guest, Jim Robb, currently employed as a VP of Alliances and Activism. And activism's not a bad word. Seems like it's gotten a bad rap, but he'll explain to you it's not a bad word. And he put out a book, Political Migrants. You should check it out. This is, if you love numbers, there's a lot of Rasmussen polling in here, but it's an answer to this trope that importing everybody across the world will give the Democrats a long-term supermajority built on the backs of the Hispanic population. And it did not turn out that way, as he will attest to. So if you're interested, go check it out. And let me add him to the stage. Jim.
Hey, Mark. Hey, how are you?
Doing great.
Super.
Yeah, audio's good. Picture looks great.
All right.
We have a lot of people online right now. And we're going to talk immigration.
It's all coming out tonight. All the skeletons that you haven't already drug out, Mark. The rest of them are coming out in the next hour or so. So I hope people are strapped in.
Yeah. I've been a little truthy for the last week or two, so it's time for you to maybe do some of it. Oh, yeah. Maybe it'll come back to bite. Well, I think the word I use. No, well, I've had my fourth coffee of the day and plus a Monster.
Monster.
But I'm hepped up on righteous fury.
Yeah.
I think that's the right set of words. Could you tell go ahead.
No. You.
Well, I just wondered if you could tell everybody about Numbers USA. What does it mean to be bipartisan? What are you trying to do? How do you do it?
Right. So there's kind of two different kinds of political organizations in the world. One's partisan, meaning they're with one party. They do things with one gang. They're just with that gang. So there's your Democratic organizations and your Republican organizations. And then the other kind are bipartisan. So that's what we are. We work with any party that wants to help Americans have a better immigration system that works in the interest of the American people. So, right. So people who are pushing immigration, they come in three camps. So I talked about bipartisan, but a different model now. So there are different kinds of people that promote immigration or talk about immigration. Three ways. So first is the business lobby. This is by far the biggest. This is your Chamber of Commerce and your Koch brothers, your many hundreds of organizations that represent the interest of businesses. And they want more people coming into the country, and in order to soften the labor market, to make labor cheaper and more available for them. Okay. And then there's the second kind of organization that talks about immigration all the time. And these are the organizations that represent the immigrants themselves. So your Catholic Charities is kind of like that. An organization called Unidas, used to be called National Council of La Raza, is like that. Their constituency are immigrants. So, okay, very good. But then there's organizations like ours, which there are only 4 or 5 in the country. And we represent the American people and what they need out of immigration. And so really we want less immigration, and we want that immigration to all be legal, and we want the immigration to be carefully focused and targeted on actual needs the American economy has, not just who wants to come. So that's what we do is we have nearly a million people on email that, and what we do is we get these folks and we get them hammering Congress with what kind of immigration policies Congress should pass. And we work with facts and figures and lots of knowledge, and we send our a million or so members the information on what bills are coming before Congress and how Americans are getting a bad deal on immigration right now, and what to do about it, what bills to push. And then they can come onto our site and they can push a couple of buttons and send a message to Congress, or they can phone call Congress. We also have grade cards so that every action that any member of Congress that is in the Congress now or has been in for the last 30 years, every action they've made on immigration is graded. So we got a lot of F- congressmen, and we got a bunch of A+ congressmen. So your A+ congressman would be like Senator Ted Cruz, and your F-, well.
Okay, yeah, give me an F-. Who's an F-, Jim?
Let's see, Padilla, and a lot of the Democratic senators are F-. AOC, she's F-.
So I wanted to point out something that came up in the chat, which is, listen, sometimes bipartisan is a dirty word because it's asserted in the chat that it means caving to Democrats. And I will say I'm definitely, a proponent of the George Carlin view that in a legislative manner, when the word bipartisan gets floated, it usually means larger than, normal con jobs being pulled off. But the nuance here is that what we're talking about is nonprofit organizations, that what bipartisan means is that you're not attached to the party. So that means that, like, if you engage me in polling, we're not trying to say, how do Republicans win on the issue of immigration? Instead, we're saying, forget the Republicans, how do we win on immigration? And that's a very big difference. And bad chat. I would not have a guest on here if it was going to be like a swamp creature snow job. So bad chat.
Just imagine, Mark, if we were a Republican organization back in the day of George W. Bush, right? So if we were Republican in the days of George W. Bush, we would have been for the Senate Gang of Eight bill, which would have tripled immigration into the United States and had a general amnesty for every single illegal alien in America. Remember that Senate Gang of Eight bill? We're the ones who defeated it in the Senate, and it was a Republican, Democrat, all the Republicans and all the Democrats were in it together. Mostly immigration has been very bipartisan. Both parties want to have more and more immigration, and they want to beat down the American worker because they really don't care about workers. Now, with Trump and the new sort of populism coming in, that's beginning to change. But mostly parties have not been the friends of workers, and neither have labor unions, strangely. So we're for the American workers and for the American people, and whichever party wants to get in line with us, good. And by the way, one other thing about bipartisanship, you can't pass a bill in the Senate unless you have 60 votes. There are only 53 Republicans, so it's not enough to have Republicans. If you can't get some Democrats working with you on this stuff, you don't have any legislation. There's no progress. Everything stays stuck in the mud just like it is now.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which you've probably answered a million times, but I think it will help sort of elucidate people on what kind of context that you gain in a position focused on this topic, because a lot of people look at these big topics and they say, well, I think this is happening. I say, well, no, I think this is happening. But guess what? If we don't know anything about immigration, there's not a hell of a lot that we can learn from each other. But a lot of people say, well, hey, like, I think there's 40 million illegal aliens. Or, hey, I think there's 35 million illegal aliens. I do the math. There's 2 million a year and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's more complex than that because people leave, like, stuff happens. So I wondered if you could give people a few minutes on your thoughts on that situation and what we might see from a self-deportation or mobility perspective, not just Tom Homan knocking down doors and flying people away.
Yeah. So under Biden brought in maybe 8 or 10 million people. And they were the terrible thing about Biden is he brought them in semi-legally. Now, this also includes 2, 3, 4 million people who snuck in. And so they're just flat out illegal, right? But most of the people he brought in showed up at the border, crossed the river. And I was down there at Eagle Pass. I saw probably 1,000 people cross in one day. I mean, the big white Border Patrol buses come and pick them up and take them to the processing center, and they get a notice to appear in front of a judge 10 years from now, and they were released into the country. Millions upon millions released into the country. So strictly speaking, these people are not currently illegal because they were given this notice to appear, and sometimes they were given work permits. And so Governor Abbott of Texas, he bussed, maybe 100,000 of these folks up to New York, and now they're sitting in luxury hotels and regular hotels in New York on the taxpayers' dime. And they don't have language, they don't have skills that are easily transferable. They're kind of dead weight. And so this is all engineered by Biden. Now, how much? So we had probably 12 million illegal immigrants before Biden got into office. He brings in 8 or 10 million, but some go home because some go home, some die, right? People are always dying. And so we don't really know. Truth is, we don't really know. Maybe as many as 20 million, and that would include the people Biden brought in semi-legally. They entered illegally, but he gave them a piece of paper, right? Because he's trying to get around the law, subvert the law, and completely undo Americans. So it's complicated. How do we get rid of them? Can you deport them all? No, we can't deport them all because the fastest we've ever been able to deport people is about a couple 100,000 a year. We're talking about millions of people. So if Congress triples the money and they train a whole bunch more, thousands and thousands of more agents, we may be able to get rid of, 600,000-700,000 a year. There are millions of people. There's a 4-year term here. So that it's really, really difficult. That the intelligent way to do it, the thinking man's way to get illegals to go home is to put e-verify, mandatory e-verify for every American business, including the farmers. Everybody has to use it. And it's already in wide use by all the Americans' largest companies. All of America's largest companies already use it. So about half of all new employees in the country every year are e-verified to find out, do they have a true legal right to work in this country? If not, sorry, can't give you a job. Well, generally the smaller employers are not using it, and they're the ones that are hiring the illegal labor. If everyone has to use it, it's going to put the squeeze on, and it'll be a gradual, because people who already have jobs, it's not legal to e-verify them. Only people who are changing jobs. But that would be good. We don't want everyone to go home on day one. That would be bad for the economy. We want a gradual shift. And so, the Trump administration's yet to signal that they're very serious about getting e-verify. Greg Abbott down in Texas, he's like putting barbed wire in the Rio Grande and Rio Grande River, and I guess there'll be machine guns next. But he has never passed e-verify for his state because Texas is still loving having cheap labor. Yeah. And it's illegal. And, who gets hurt are Americans. Let me tell you one statistic that'll blow your mind. Did you know that in the last 5 years, of all the new jobs created in America, 88% have been taken by foreign-born individuals? 88%. So, this is government numbers, so we know it's true.
Yeah, it's probably 147%.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is one thing the government does pretty well, doing these statistics, but it's so shocking that. So just imagine, why would this be? It's because we have millions and millions of people coming in. I said a lot of them are sitting in hotel rooms, but a lot of them are out working too. And we have millions and millions of people coming in, And then you've got also maybe an overgenerous welfare system on the other side for Americans. These things work in concert, and you have push pull,
Yeah.
and it's a wipeout for Americans. So things have
Yeah.
to change.
On top of years of soft racism in the hiring process,
Right.
and on top of COVID and the Great Resignation.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't you might have trust, but I poll unemployment rate every month, and I just had 8.8% when the BLS reported 4. So it's like, if it looks like a duck. But so let me try and see if I get this right. E-Verify is a federal program.
Yeah.
It's mandated, but above a certain size company threshold, or is it just not
No.
enforced below?
No, it's the reasons the big companies all use it is because it's mandated for all government contractors and subcontractors. So
okay, but you've had some wins with E-Verify. Could you tell us about that?
Yes. So states can individually mandate it for all of their businesses. So even though the federal government has not yet done that, that's what we need them to do. But yeah, so we did a big deal down in Florida, working with the governor and working with him and the legislature. We have lobbying down there. And we got our members to concentrate our fire on the legislature, and by gum, they passed mandatory verify. Now, it's for companies 25 workers and above, I believe. So the next round, we're going to get it to smaller and smaller until it's everybody. But it's already picked up a huge number of workers that were not covered before. And so they're gradually making it less livable in Florida for illegals to come there and take American jobs.
I love the idea of working smarter, not harder. And so I personally think that E-Verify as law of the land would be a great way to rebalance what has been a horrible trend. We tried to spitball on this program before about other ways that we could be creative. I don't know, something to do with remittances or maybe being more aggressive with ICE raids against business. Have you guys thought about that kind of stuff?
Sure. Yeah. We don't have an official position on remittances, but I think it's a great idea to tax them because, I mean, it's money that very often people aren't paying taxes that they owe because they're getting jobs under the table a lot of times. So it's like, hey, let's get some revenue out of this. And this is money going away from the country, never to be seen again. So it's like another foreign aid program almost. I mean, a lot of the whole Mexican economy, and especially like Salvadoran and Central America, their whole economy is kept up by money coming from American workers. And this is money that's not going into American pockets and is not paying for people to go to send American kids to school and pay for their doctors. And I mean, it's not a tragedy if it's in scale, if it's a certain amount, but you get to as big as it's gotten and then illegal, it is tragic. And then what was the other idea you mentioned? Remittances and what was
getting a little bit more aggressive, maybe less with raiding apartments where there might be kids and babies and busting in doors of restaurants or whatever, right?
Yeah, I was mystified. In the first Trump administration, they didn't raid many. They didn't do much on that. I mean, Trump was just less sharp in everything. He was an amateur when he came in. That was the problem with him. He didn't know what the levers of government to pull, and then he put a lot of people in who didn't agree with him at all, right? So he got much less done. Now he's coming in fast and hard. And Tom Homan, he's a pretty hard ass guy, right? He's
gotta love it.
Yeah.
Oh,
so if he's
does Numbers USA have an official position on Tom Homan?
Well, I mean, we like him, sure, and he's known to us, and he's a good guy, and he's mostly a law enforcement official, right? Shouldn't we have people in law enforcement who are like no law enforcement? And so, but I'll be really impressed when they're not just running down the streets grabbing guys. And as important as that is, but go to a site where they're hiring, they have 300 illegal workers, and round illegal workers up and then arrest the bosses who know it, right? I don't like these raids when they're arresting these campesinos, but the big boss, maybe he gets a fine. Oh, now that's not good, right? He's the guy who needs to go to prison because he's defrauding the Americans who work around his plant. They should have.
Well, it seems to be a trend that almost everybody defrauds Americans. So,
Yeah, it's I'm glad that Musk is looking into all of that, and more than looking into it. Now, Can't wait to find out when he gets to the Pentagon and gets into the health payment system. It's just going to be fascinating. But but in the whole immigration thing, it's the problem with so much of government, it's not done for the benefit of individual Americans. It's done for various special interests. And I guess they're Americans too, but it's mostly big businesses that are calling the shots, and universities and the press and all these interests. Then guys who are like most people in America don't have a college education, right? We're always talking about college. Send your kid to college. Like everyone's in college. Well, it's not true. Only a
Yeah, it's
third
like
of
60,
Americans,
40, right? Yeah.
yeah, well, only a third of Americans have a 4-year college degree. Okay, so that means 2/3 don't. I mean, a lot of those have had some college or have had a trade school, or they're intelligent people, but they don't have that 4-year magical degree. And man, things go hard for them in this country. I've got a chart that it's one of the charts I sent you that shows what happens to people who don't have a college degree in terms of pay. And it shows you why we're so concerned about the unfair foreign competition.
Yeah, we're going to backload the charts because I kind of want to. You can't talk about immigration and especially illegal immigration without touching on the economic impact. And I think there's also a story there too about how it's like, okay, well, you said, yeah, even the special interests are Americans. But we started this show with the concept of the fourth turning and basically a lack of order and integrity, and how if you're in a position to wield the lever of power, that you have a moral obligation to represent like America, the people, which include the tax donkeys, the middle class, who if put too much straws on the camel's back, it's going to break. And we're getting awfully close to that. But what I wanted to ask you first, first we have some polling that you can tell me, but I said I don't know if anybody's ever done any questions like this. They came from you. But one question before we get there that this conversation tickled in my mind is that, okay, let's play this out. Let's just say where we're at, 20 million illegal aliens. Let's say Holman gets really good at it and maybe gets rid of 500,000 a year, and then maybe another, couple 100,000 self-deport. Barring black swans, what does that do to the economy? With that rate, that amount of change in the labor force, with
Right. So
consumer demand.
What it'll do is it will tighten the labor market somewhat. Even the amount that you mentioned, it'll take like 3 or 4 years before it'll be felt. We have a huge economy. A few 100,000 here or there doesn't make much difference. I mean, the economy created like 135,000 new jobs last month, right? So I mean, this is big. We're big time. So but maybe after 2 or 3 years of deporting at large numbers and then putting the squeeze on where people just say, hey, it's too tough, I'm going home. If we could get more like 1 million or more out, maybe the second million sort of starts thinking about going home, then wages in the bottom end of the economy start rising. There's this trope that always goes out. Oh, your tomatoes won't be picked. You won't have any blueberries. Poor bourgeoisie, no blueberries in their
you're no avocado toast. Yeah.
Avocado toast. There are only 6 crops that are handpicked in America that are large scale. I mean, so they're always talking about strawberries because strawberries are one of them, but they're only like 6. It's most stuff is machine picked. Did you know only less than 1% of immigrants work in agriculture? Less than 1%. It's actually
is it food services where the bulk of them are, or
it's services. Yeah, it's services, construction. Right. It's stuff that's not high skilled work. So it's like the lower end of construction. It's people are like, doing this and, doing this, but it's a lot of grunt work, and it's restaurant people, etc. One things that have changed since we had so much illegal immigration coming into the country. Teenagers don't work anymore. Kids used to come, me and kids, I don't know, maybe you're old enough. We used to go around and ask people if we could mow their lawn for money. But kids don't bother doing that anymore. Why? because illegal immigrants are there doing it cheaper.
Yeah.
And
Right.
people say, I just love these, these guys, they're so good. And they are good. I mean, there's no problem with the work of these guys. It's just that used to be Americans did that work. And American teenagers got ready to work for their careers by learning how to work as teenagers, but very few teenagers work now. So, this is one thing that's happened. What would happen if some of these illegals went home? Well, American teenagers would start working. People work when it makes sense for them. If they can't get a job, they're not going to go looking. Why? I can tell you why you're getting higher unemployment numbers were self-reported, because only people who go to the unemployment office and fill out forms like every week are counted in that.
Yeah.
People who are discouraged, people who couldn't find a job for the last 2 years, they're not counted in it, in the government's numbers, but they're still unemployed. But someone's employed in this country.
So we like to be interactive here. I found another one in the chat. Illegal immigrants are an issue even with our emergency responders. 50% of the calls are for non-English speaking. They can't answer questions. What is the burden, if Numbers USA has a view on that, into our medical system, and what kind of money might that free up or change? Or is that one of the things that you lead with when you talk to legislatures?
No, it's not one of the things we lead with, because if maybe we had a better study, we would lead with that more, because that's a great point. It's a wonderful point. It's usually true in urban areas, in the coastal cities, mostly in the Southwest, right? Because there's lots of places in the country that don't have a lot of immigrants, and everything is just kind of the way it used to be. For example, think about West Virginia. Well, they have very, very few immigrants in West Virginia, legal, illegal, or any kind. And so the funny thing is, people tell you that, oh, these are jobs Americans won't do anymore. You've heard this probably for decades, right? And it's like hotel maids. Oh, Americans somehow decided they didn't want to do that. Go to West Virginia and look at the hotel maids. They're all American citizens, right? They're all people who've been here forever. Why? Because there's no immigrants to take those jobs. And so is this that people unusually or uniquely in West Virginia love to clean hotel rooms? No, it's because they are able to clean hotel rooms, because someone else hasn't crowded them out with lower wage demands. They don't demand good working conditions or maybe even legal conditions. And so, the hotels fill up with these low-end foreign workers who send the money home. Americans don't work there. Americans have to go on welfare. When you hire an illegal worker, Mark, you're really paying for it. The Americans have to subsidize it 2 and 3 ways. First way, think about this, okay? The first way is you're hiring them below market rates, right? But they're desperate, so they'll work for anything, right? So you're hiring that hotel maid. She's working for $10 an hour, but truth is, you can't feed your family on $10 an hour. And since even if they're an illegal immigrant, they've got an American child because they were born in this country, and now that child collects on the parent on behalf of the child, collects food stamps, goes to the emergency room, has Medicaid, all these things. We're going to get to this on the whole anchor baby phenomenon, but so the person can't help it. They're so poor, but they're here illegally. They're collecting, and so we call that in America, in my business, we call this what employers are doing, hiring these people too cheap for them to live, and the state has to make up the difference. We call that the privatization of profits and the socialization of costs.
Well, I have a chart that shows that too in another light.
Okay.
And like I said, we'll get to the charts at the end, but I want to take a quick moment before we continue, because we have a lot more stuff to cover, to reiterate here that Jim Robb works for Numbers USA, which is a nonpartisan organization attempting to look out for the working class in America that's been perennially screwed. And they're unsung heroes that are trying and achieving, like getting action to help reduce immigration, free up middle-class jobs, rebalance the economy, because there are special interests, like basically the theme. They keep saying who will pick the crops. They keep saying Americans don't do this work. But if you've been to like an economics 101 class, there's a thing called the supply-demand curve, right? And so to say that argument, except for only the dumbest mainstream media outlets, is intellectually dishonest, which
Right.
is the tool they use, the gaslighting tool they've used over and over again. So what I want to ask people is open up another window while you're listening, go to Numbers USA, and Jim, what do you want them to do?
It says join. Just join because it's free. All we're asking you to do is give us your email and your address, et cetera, so we can supply you with the tools that you can shout at your congressman and your senator to say lower immigration and get rid of illegal immigration, and here are the specific bills that we need you to back in Congress that will get that done. Congress knows what it needs to do. They're going to do it when they feel they have no choice but to do it. And by the way, we are having effect. How about that Lake and Riley Act? Pretty good, huh? Suddenly, and it's kind of stupid, right? Because what the law says is that illegal immigrants who are already breaking the law, right? They've already done a criminal act by being here, who've then also shoplifted or driven drunk and got caught, or do some of these crimes. That is, when they're caught, oh, you got to call the feds, and the feds have to deport them. Oh, well, you mean that wasn't already the law? Well, actually, it was the law, but it wasn't so strict that it wasn't being done. And so one kills this poor a young nursing student, Lake and Riley, and finally people get an uproar. But that was us pushing for that, right? So what we need is to get hundreds of thousands of more people. Go to numbersusa.com. We're the people who make it happen, and happy to have you. We'll tell you everything you need to know, and you'll know so much more about immigration. So our members who are watching this right now, the level of knowledge they have, I mean, they're like college graduates in immigration, because
It's
they
like
just
black belt kung fu.
yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I didn't know that you guys were pushing that.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank
What
you.
was your biggest barrier for that?
Getting Democrats, but so and this is why it's important to have a president who's talking about it, right? For Biden, he wouldn't have signed anything even if Congress had passed it. So were you going to get any Democrats to take a chance to cross the aisle and vote for that? Of course not, because Biden would have not had your back. But Trump said, no, we're not going to have this with illegal immigrant thieves and pickpockets and murderers running around and no one bothering to call the feds and deport them. So let's do this. So then Congress got behind it, and then we had our army of activists pouring the fire metaphorically onto Congress and calling them and emailing them, and all the way going to their offices and doing all the things we do. And they got the message. And then Fetterman, in that wonderful Fox News segment, right? He says, hey, if we don't pass this bill, it's why we lost. And that made a big difference, because they're thinking, if so Fetterman's sticking his neck out, maybe I can stick my neck out. So
That's funny. We were talking about the Kubler-Ross model, and that's exploration.
Right.
And the MAGA was like, oh, that's so cool. And the Democrats probably beat him up behind the scenes, but poor guy.
He's the best Democratic senator. I mean, he had a shaky start, with his health, and it's really, really bad. But guess what? He came out of his depression, and now he's ready to go to work. And he is waking up and smelling the coffee. He's not stuck in the mud. Oh, one thing I wanted to say, Mark, is, people talk about liberal and conservative, like Republicans are conservative, Democrats are liberal, et cetera. And that's true in a way, in the old way of thinking. But there's another way of using those words, because conservative means you want things to be the way they are, or the way they used to be. So when you think about the whole establishment here in my neighboring Washington, I live in Falls Church. I'm just outside the city. So all the people there, all my neighbors work for the government or for something that works for the government. I mean, me included, right? I'm lobbying the government. So we're all have something to do with that. But these people are not liberal in the one sense. They're arch conservatives. They don't want anything to ever change. They want to keep things the way they are. And that's the way to understand
status quo. It's the status quo.
Trump's coming in. He's the radical. He's like saying, no, actually, we're not going to do things the way we've done them for the last 100 years, because they're not working anymore. We're going to change it up. And people are just going hysterical because they've made the status quo an idol.
Yeah, we don't like labels here. on Rasmussen Reports, we don't like him at all. I don't even know how I would describe myself, other than I could tell you all the arcs I went through. But if you took like a strict constitutionalist and married them to a zealot populist with a little sprinkling of classical liberal on top, and then maybe shoved in like a Knight Templar Crusader, like what would that be? Like what? I don't know. You know me better than me. Like,
No,
what
I
is
think
that?
that's Mark Mitchell, all right. Well, I think it doesn't have a label yet because it's a populist for sure, but there are different kinds of populism, and there's Bernie Sanders populism, but you're not that brand.
No.
But the Republican populist and the Democratic populist have one thing in common: they both feel like the little guy has been left out in this whole equation, and you definitely agree with that, and I agree with that. And this is why, this is about my charts. And this is what our whole emphasis has been for the last 28 years. We've run Numbers USA.
Yeah.
I've been there since day one with Roy Beck, the founder. And so the thing is, we saw that the big globalist corporations were rigging the whole system for their benefit, and the universities and the media and all these people who loved the way things were going, they just wanted to keep it the way it was, and they wanted to have more of the same, more immigration. Let's globalize everything. Globalism is wonderful. So we're shipping all the jobs, factories overseas, and we're bringing in overseas workers here to work our factories. So that's going to be great for the owners. It's going to be super great. And in fact, the whole story of the 21st century economy, Mark, has been the rich have gotten so much richer. And it's not because they're evil. The system has worked to their advantage. They can okay, I got but they can send their capital anywhere in the world. They can invest anywhere in the world, right? But the American worker, and then foreign workers can come here from any country in the world. But where can the American worker go to work outside this country? Nowhere. Welcome, nowhere.
And then on top of that, they can print, and then all the assets appreciate, and middle class gets left behind.
Yeah,
it's sick. It's like a self-perpetual. It's a tool of a machine of oppression, finely honed by a lot of people that have aligned interests and weak wills, in my opinion, and a lot of hubris. They were able to convince themselves they were maybe doing ubiquitously the right thing for Americans. I want to talk numbers now. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. It's working for them. Why stop, right?
Well, here's the problem. I mean, we're all this way. Everyone is, we're all born sinners. And so we think if it's working for us, it must be working for everybody, right? So the wealthy really can't imagine the lives of the working poor, especially.
So I like to think I can, and I'm not wealthy, but I will say, we've talked about this, you and I, but there's something more going on. Like it is spiritual, but it's beyond that too, because I know people who profess that they're saved Christians, and yet they can convince themselves to be morally flexible. And yet I know people who are not Christian who know the difference between right and wrong, and can exercise integrity. And so Christianity is great. It's a big part of it, but there's something else that failed, and America needs to get it back.
Oh, right. There's nothing, there's no substitute for integrity, right? There's no substitute for truth telling. I was speaking of Christianity. I was in the Bible. I was reading in the Bible this morning, the book of Proverbs, just going through a chapter, and it's all about honesty. It's about honesty. It's about doing the right thing and honesty. And over again, the lying man, he comes to no good, but the man who's upright, who's got integrity, he'll go to greater and greater things. This is the sort of the wisdom there. And it's just like, it's easy to lie when it's to your advantage. It's easy to lie to yourself. It's working for me, must be working for everybody. But we need to have a little more imagination in saying, my accounts may be getting bigger and bigger, but other people are barely making it, and they're working as hard as they can, sometimes 2 and 3 jobs. Shouldn't be like that.
Yeah. Well, when there's so much selective information available with which to indulge it's sick, and it needs to change. I was wielding this sort of truth yesterday,
Mm.
And I thought, well, like when the temple gets overrun with money changers, what do? You got to destroy, you've got to burn it to the ground and salt the earth. And maybe that's harsh, but in my opinion, what we need to see is a modern pragmatic version of that wielded on the federal government. And when I say salt the earth, what I mean is I don't think these people are going to find integrity overnight, the ones that remain or the new ones that we hired. There needs to be a way of instilling some form of independent, rational oversight, meaning like, no, in this culture that we've instilled in this mechanism, we don't believe what's on the front of the New York Times because it's intellectually dishonest lie. I don't know how you do that.
I mean, yeah, the problem is, I mean, it's half facts and half conjecture and opinion. It's all mixed together now. And they've sort of all been that. They've sort of been that way most of my life, but it's gotten with the Trump derangement syndrome, it got much worse 9 years ago, and it's in fact, I think they're not as bad as they were in 2020 when he was at the end of his term. I just think they went absolutely nuts then.
Yeah.
But
well, it was a 4-year sustained psychological operation. And I'll tell you, you go to msnbc.com right now, and it just doesn't have the full weight that it did even just months ago. And I don't know how much of that is moderation or how much of it is defeat, but
maybe some of both. But it's good. You know, sometimes people have to. It's like you have kids, so you know what a toddler's like, right? And when a toddler doesn't get their way, they just start screaming. They'll have a fit. I remember one of my earliest memories is me as a toddler having a fit. And my poor mother, I was at a clothes store, and it was in, I don't know what, who knows what goes wrong with a toddler's mind. But I was beating the floor. I was like chewing the carpet like Hitler. I was so angry, and nobody could do anything with me. It's like, come here and go there. Yeah. And I was hysterical because I wasn't getting my way. But the only way to work, toddlers, you have to just work through it, and they have to learn they're not going to win. You are not going to win. You can do this 100 years. You are never going to win. That's the only way, right? And it's like it's like the press is kind of like that now, right? In the Democrats, some of them, like Fetterman, he's like, okay, I get it. I mean, I'm still different than you, but let's see where we can work together. Now that makes sense. Yeah. But others, Schumer, he's not there. Obviously.
Well, he must not be encumbered by some of the same things other people are. I think, like, from a government and legislator perspective, the walls probably need to close in. But for the media, their credibility is so gone that I guess they'll just fade into irrelevance and be bought. I don't know. I think they should buy MSNBC like Elon and put the Gorilla channel on there or something like that. It would be better use of the bandwidth. But Jim, I want to talk about these questions. I'm going to put them up. Hold on. Because these came from you, and you're always a good source of creative things to poll on. And this is Birthright Citizenship Majority Want Limits. Amid talk of limiting so-called birthright citizenship, there's a clear majority for some limits on the practice of granting automatic citizenship for U.S.-born children of foreigners. And here, we don't like to read articles. We like to go right to the crosstabs. So, could you tell us what prompted this? Is this new? Are there other people that put numbers out like this? And what do we find?
There is very little polling ever been done on the subject, strangely. But what's prompted this was the poll done by the team over at the Wall Street Journal. And by and large, they're good pollers over there. They've got Tony Fabrizio and I forget who their Democratic poller is, and they work together, and the team, Aaron Zittner and the staff, the reporting staff over there that work with them, they're doing their best to come up with honest questions, and they had a real good result in the election, as you noticed.
No, I didn't. Okay, little aside. I went on Fox twice ever because Rasmussen was blacklisted for like 9 years. I went on Trace Gallagher before the election, and I said, Trump's going to win by 2 points. And they're like, oh, isn't that great? And then they brought me on again, and I sent them bullet points, and they changed the show notes 5 minutes before I went on because they wanted to say, well, Rasmussen did a good job, and so did Wall Street Journal. And I'm like, well, they only had Trump up 1 out of 3 times, and their states showed Kamala Harris winning. And Rupert Murdoch hasn't had me on since then, but they weren't bad. They weren't like Morning Consult bad. I will tell you that.
They try. They try. So now, but here's the point.
They try.
Yeah. So the point is their question on birthright citizenship, should we continue it or could we cancel it? Was I did not like the question way it was worded, and it got a 2-to-1 people. 2-to-1 people said no, we don't want to cancel automatic birthright citizenship because it said, should the constitutional right for birthright citizenship be revoked, or words to that effect, right? So it was like it put it as a constitutional right. Well, you define it that way. What are people supposed to say?
People don't want their constitutional rights taken away. Yeah,
of course not. If it really is one. So what we decided to do is have 3 questions that looked at 3 different aspects of birthright citizenship. And just to define it for your audience, not everyone knows this term, right? Birthright citizenship means if you're born in the United States and you belong here, if you're a foreign diplomat and your child is born here, they're not an American because they're not here under the control of the American government. So the way the 14th Amendment, which started all this, it defines it as saying if you're here and you're under the control of the American law, then you're a citizen. So the question is, what about, well, there were no illegal immigrants when this amendment was passed back in the 19th century. So now we have illegal immigrants. Are they under the control of the American law? Are they under ours, or are they under the country they came from? So this has been a big fight. And we think that people who snuck into this country and have a child, that child should not automatically be an American because they're actually citizens of Mexico, and they all have dual citizenship. Have you noticed those bull passports and all that? Of course, they're citizens of Mexico. So let them be citizens of Mexico. Okay, so this is the thing. So we decided to ask this 3 ways. You want to take us through it?
Do you support or oppose the United States changing its current practices of granting U.S. citizenship to births to tourists and other foreign visitors? Pretty straight, pretty fair. It's factual, doesn't have anything loaded in it, and it gets to 51%, which is a majority. Boom, 29% strongly support, 37% oppose, but only 1 in 4 strongly, and 12% are not sure. So we're looking at 51 to 37. So that's a pretty big margin.
So the reason we asked it that way was because there's a whole industry called birth tourism. And women who are 9 months pregnant are brought in from around the world. Now the government tries to keep them out, but if they even sneak across the border, right? They're not even here on a tourism thing. If they sneak across the border and their baby is born in Juarez, then right now they're considered automatic U.S. citizens. We said, how about that? You like that? And people said, no, we don't think we do like it. Yeah. So notice that the Democrat support for getting rid of that is very high. What is it? 49%?
49%. A plurality.
That's very good.
A plurality.
Right. Yeah.
10-point margin. So yeah, this is definitely not what you'd expect, but Democrats are actually kind of anti-immigration, like not as much as everybody else.
They're not anti-immigration. They're anti-illegal immigration, and they want to. And if you ask them about numbers, which you do all the time, they also want to bring the numbers down. So people want less immigration. They want it more targeted to what we really need, and they want to get rid of all illegal immigration.
Yeah. I think we had the numbers. We had a numbers question that was different in our 10-state combined swing state poll, where we asked the current level is this. Do you want this level, this level? Like, what should the level be? We might not have actually told them what the level was. I forget. But I think the Democrats, it was only 20 or 30% that wanted a level of legal immigration higher than the current level, which, if you ask them, they would say, no, we need to bring all of everyone here. And that's just not true. That's not what they believe.
No, that's not what they believe. And look at the Hispanic numbers, by the way. Do you see that?
Yeah.
That 53% of Hispanics want to get rid of birthright citizenship to foreign visitors. Isn't
Yeah.
that
And they're
crazy?
also the least not sure. That's a pretty funny thing too.
Right, because they know they don't like it. It's just like here's the crazy thing. I mean, I wrote a whole book about this, right? The more established Hispanics are in this country, even if their grandpa was illegal, okay, it doesn't matter. They're very hostile in general toward illegal immigration because it undercuts them in this country, and they love this country. Polling proves it. Our polling proves it.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one. Do you support or oppose the United States, again, changing its current practice of granting U.S. citizenship to illegal immigrants who were released into the United States between 2021 and 2025? So these are the Biden ones.
These are the Biden ones.
And
So,
it's less of a signal.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
What's this? 44% to 43% split, slight 1 point plurality. And it's not because more people were unsure. It's because you have a slightly higher opposed signal.
Yeah, because I think the thing we wanted to test if the Biden illegal people had less support than the others. And I think that probably that approach was shown not to be as appealing because people don't want to single out people, right? They want something that's a general thing. They don't want to say, oh, people who came in this year get it, but people who came in that year don't get it. I think that's what's teaching. It didn't smell right to people.
You've seen a big change with Hispanic somewhat support.
Yeah.
31 to 18.
Yeah, that really dropped there.
Yeah.
So that question is not the right way to get our point across, I think.
Well, Rasmussen will put out every question we ever poll on. So here it is. This is for other people to parse to figure out what does it mean.
Right, exactly.
But we're not going to spike this stuff. Do you support or oppose limiting automatic birthright citizenship to births where at least one parent is a citizen or legal permanent resident? So it's like, let's just bring sanity to this whole thing.
Right.
And common sense wins out 56%, 32% strongly to 35%. And the Democrats are at 56.
They're at 56, right? Democrats are saying, yeah, why don't we do this? Because your representatives.
Look, Republicans are only at 61. It's like literally bipartisan. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is bipartisan. And this is the thing that when you start talking about birthright citizenship and getting rid of it for people who have two illegal immigrant parents, Democrats in Congress very often will call you a racist to your face. You're just a racist. You're actually saying the majority of members of your own party are racist. That's what you're saying. If you look down in these crosstabs, which I've examined them pretty closely, it's like, it's every age agrees, every race agrees, ethnicity, parties,
liberals, 48 to 40.
Yeah. And income levels, not a lot. The education is not a big difference. It's like really Americans, it's like 60% of Americans pretty much.
Man, even the graduate degrees.
Yeah. Oh, graduate degrees.
Probably some xenophobia there. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, it's the thing is, it just makes sense that if you don't want to reward illegal immigration like this, because otherwise you'll just get more and more of it. If you reward it with jobs, you reward it with Medicaid. You give hotel rooms in New York City, and food stamps and automatic birthright citizenship. I mean, who wouldn't want to come here?
Here's the test right there. Trump strong disapprovers, 50%, 39% strongly. So yeah, this is like a trend. Whoa, I don't know what I did there. This is a trend that we've been talking about a very long time, which in modern kleptocratic oligarchy politics, time and time again, Republican voters don't get what Republican voters want, and Democrat voters get what Democrats don't want. It's like almost an axiom.
No, and it's right. The parties in Congress are really, really separate on the issues, but not the people on the ground. And so it's kind of tragic. And so, this is why I'm kind of, I'm really happy that Musk is in there auditing the books of all this stuff, because, it's like if you asked, maybe you've asked this question, Mark, I didn't pay attention. Do you think the books of the various departments of government should be audited? And if you ask that question, 75% are going to say yes, or 85%, or some ridiculous high number, right? Because
We asked a more polarizing version of that just in
okay.
the last few days. It was, do you approve or disapprove of the Department of Government Efficiency? I forget the exact wording, but it's like reviewing government.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, it's +11, which is more popular than Elon Musk or Trump.
Oh,
And
right,
so,
right.
yeah.
But if you just ask the principles, should the government have to have an audit like a private company? Everyone's going to say yes. So that's what drives that. It's the basic attitude, and yet they've never had to face one. You remember when Ron Paul used to ask year in and year out, let's audit the Federal Reserve, and people just laughed at him like he was crazy. And yet now it's going to happen.
It's happening.
Yeah, well,
Jim, it's happening. Where is that? I got to get it. I got to put it up. Hold on. It's happening. I'm so happy. How old is he? I'm so happy that Ron Paul lived to see the Fed getting audited.
Must be like 95 now, right? I mean,
man,
it's getting up there.
So this is another question I wanted to ask you before we go into like economics, okay?
Right.
And it's like, this is a question mark. Why did Kamala Harris, I'm using this as an anecdote for a bigger question, know she was behind in the polls, because we know now that she knew that, because they don't follow Rasmussen reports. She knew she was behind in the polls. She decides to go on Fox News. She knows the very first question is going to be like, why? Why the border? Like, what did you do? Why didn't you do? And she didn't have, not only did she not have a question prepared to try and change the mind of voters, she literally like wrestled with Bret Baier's brain to try and change reality, to create a new like dimension where that question hadn't been asked. And that brings me back to the Democrats are committed, like completely 100% with every fiber of their being, committed to a luxury belief set that is now causing them to lose, and they're not changing it. And so I want you to explore that, like kind of overlaid with a lot of people wonder why this border invasion happened. Who did it? Why? Do we know? How can we ever know?
Well, I mean, more books will have to be written to tell what the Biden White House was very close-lipped. The whole thing was a kind of a conspiracy, right? Because the guy was barely alive toward the end of his term, and it was all a conspiracy to protect him and to protect his reputation and make it look like he's still in charge, when I don't know, doesn't look like he was very in charge, right? So
other forces want this.
Yeah, well, so the first thing is, what you've got is you have an illusion of a guy in charge who's not in charge. So then the first thing he wants to do, he says, I'm going to undo everything Trump did. So he comes in this reactionary thing. I'm going to undo it. And, kind of that's what Trump just did to Biden's things, except same day he undoes, he redoes something else, right? Put something else in place. Biden, they come in, they tear up like 100 executive orders on what you do about the border, and they put nothing in place. It's like they took a nap. They has 2 hours of work a day. He tore up all these executive orders. He takes a nap. 4 years pass. Part of it, I think, it's just the incompetence of a kind of a phony regime in which nobody's really in charge. Nobody's looking at it, and there's no way to do a course correction because nobody's really in charge. And they started something, and so I think I don't think, and maybe your listeners will think I'm naive, but I from where I sit, I think it's just massive incompetence, massive lack of political smarts, massive lack of judgment. And then, they didn't believe much in American workers. They didn't believe that Americans needed protecting. So they're pouring all these millions of people. They knew they were coming in. They didn't seem to believe. Now we're talk about economics. They didn't seem to believe that would have an impact on workers. but it did, and it had.
So you don't think there was like unified nefarious intent?
I don't think they had unified anything. I think that's one of their problems. Now, it's not that I don't believe that stuff ever happens at all. It's just that I think the way I was, pretty close to, where it was happening, and I talked to a lot of people in government and stuff, and I just think, this was a White House that was like a Potemkin village, you would say. It was a facade of a government. And they did stuff, but it's like this bureaucrat in the corner did something, and this poly official, this junior person, there was no one senior, so they just did this. I think it was grotesque incompetence. And yes, are someone guilty for that? Yes, they lied their faces off, right? Lied.
Well,
But
it's like escape accountability lying, like
right.
Not, yeah.
That's right. So because of that, it's like they took out all policies, and then things just drifted into just complete disorder.
Well, it did seem that there was rapid and aggressive exploitation of said holes, and I'm not using that to counteract it. I'm trying to learn here. I think you might be onto that, but it's like the border opened up, and
Right.
then it's like the flood happened.
Well, it did, but you didn't need. I mean, once you let the walls down, then you don't have to get anyone coming. They're there ready to come, and the cartels are it. So what Biden should have done is left all of Trump's stuff in place and upped the ante more. Right? He should have. But what we need to do now is we need to destroy these cartels. Do you know more than 1 million Americans have lost their lives to fentanyl overdoses? 1 million. That's more than all foreign wars, right? That's more than all our
wars. Than COVID. Yeah, I'm with you, 100%.
Well, and it's like there's nobody who doesn't know somebody who's died of an overdose, or at least their family, right? Everyone, it's touching everybody. It's a travesty. And then so Trump puts on a threat to do 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and people scream like it's the end of the world. He says, no, you're going to get this unless you shut off the fentanyl, right? That's someone who really is looking out for Americans. He doesn't want Americans to needlessly die. He doesn't want Americans. How about he doesn't want Americans to lose their jobs to illegal people from around the world who just decide they want to move in? Because guess what? Americans can't move out and go get a job in their country. Americans
nowhere to go. Nowhere to go.
The end of the line. And if you don't protect your own citizens, you have no legitimacy as a government. So
you just brought up a really important point that I still don't think that we've wrapped our heads around, is that we came 1.5 inches away from the course of human history being very different. Because, and again, I'm a horrible cynic, and I think that if people show you who they are, then you can assume that in all of your dealings, they're going to be like that. And I think that there is a certain aspect of the Democrats that, though incompetent, are also nakedly lawless. And I think that what they saw over the last year is a dire threat to their existence as a unified party. Now, I think they're a lot less powerful than they were. But if they gain power again after seeing what happened over the last month, I think a lot more is on the table than was previously. Like, for instance, the hollow promises to pack the Supreme Court 4 years ago, I don't think will be hollow anymore. Like that kind of thing. And they're openly calling for judicial activism, people to ignore the laws of the land in order to stop Trump's agenda. So it's like, wow, we went from impending collapse of the American empire to a bright new future in which, as the last domino of free speech to fall, our course may have been corrected just in the last month. It could be a complete reversal of the trends of governance in the world.
Well, something new is afoot here in the United States, but it's not the only country. These similar movements are in most of the Western democracies, and really in every democratic country. There's a movement in France. There's one in England. There's one in Germany. Italy, the prime minister is a little sort of like Trump light. And the thing is, immigration has been a large part of the change. Two things. It's like national finance is getting out of control, right? Spiraling out of control. And that's the thing. And so something has to be done. Okay, so there's Musk in the Department of Government Efficiency, and then but also immigration. So what? Sometimes people ask me, what has changed? Why is it such a big thing now when 30 years ago it was under control, more or less, or 40 years ago, say? Well, think of the things that have changed in 40 years. Now, 40 years ago, it would have been unthinkable that someone could fly from Bombay to Mexico City, take a train up, pay off some gangsters, and have them to get you everything you need to get you across that river. And so, it's like it's been international crime syndicate, and now the relative cheapness of international travel have worked together. And then social media. Someone gets across the border, they whip out their phone, they say, hey, I just snuck into the United States, and they're putting me on a big white bus, and they're giving me a work permit, and I'm going to go up to New York City. You can do it too. The rest of the village empties out. Why wouldn't it? 40 years ago, it was a different deal. Even getting across the desert in Mexico was a very big deal. Now it's nothing. So everything is easier, and so every major country, not just us, everyone is facing this thing of people are abusing the asylum system. They're faking it. And we have to have wholesale reform, not just around the edges. We need to say, hey, look, we're not doing the asylum thing anymore because it's all phony baloney. We got to change.
Well, it all rolls up to a massive layer of centralized rot.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, we're seeing now that the EU is doing the same kind of things. Like there's probably the same kind of funding pyramids. That's just coming out now. But I think it does ultimately come back, and maybe not 100%, but to Twitter. I think if Twitter was still in sort of like censorship government hands, the 2024 election for Trump would have been lost. And I think because of that election, you're going to see capitulation on the social media fronts in other countries. So I think like that aspect alone is very symbolic. And I think probably the number one thing that the current Democrat Party would do if they got into power would be to come after Twitter in some very nefarious way. So it's like, maybe not. Maybe it's a matter of likelihood, but I don't think we're out of the woods. And I think it's very dire. And I know this because we were put on a government list and almost shut down, and they attacked us. They paid people to attack us, essentially. And they, look at what happened with CBS polls. They were 6 points to the left of us in 2024 numbers. And then the second they get a lawsuit from Trump, it's like all of a sudden they match Rasmussen reports. All of a sudden it's exactly the same numbers. So it's deep. The swamp is deep, and it hasn't been like, I don't know. Like I was talking last week, and I think it's like what we're seeing might be torches and pitchforks kind of stuff. There could be, I don't know what massive unified, like strong majority rage looks like in polling. And I'm going to have to start measuring for it, because at some point people might get there.
Well, I think people are less frustrated now. I mean,
they're happy.
Mad they've heard some of this stuff come out, but now that something seems to be done about things. And I think that general satisfaction should, as long as Trump's numbers are sort of ticking up, that people are less unhappy. So
we have right direction at 46% right now. The highest we've ever seen is 47.
Wow.
So I wouldn't even watch Trump approval. I would watch right direction. If we get to 47 or 48 even.
Right. And, it'd be nice. And I'm not a conspiracy type person. I just, when one comes out that turns out there was a conspiracy, I say, oh, okay, there was one. But, you don't have to anticipate them. They come out so thick, so fast. But I hope some people go to jail who've been basically manipulating and stealing government money. And I don't know who that's going to be, but it looks like it's looking much worse than I ever thought it was going to. I didn't believe that there was so little oversight and so when Musk came out and said, hey, they're not even bothering to put the codes in so that it can't be audited. Gee, you know what? At my organization, that gets you fired.
Yeah, some people were doing it because they're dumb. Some people are doing it because they were told to do it that way. But there's probably a lot of people in the cartels even who are getting money because of those payments because somebody said, "Oh, I guess I'll just do this." I want to bring it to economy now,
All right.
and I'm going to start with. Do you want me to start with the GDP per capita? Oh, you have GDP per capita and median wage as well.
Yeah.
Let's
The
start
last
there.
chart I sent is the killer chart. That's the killer chart right there.
Well,
right,
then should we start with this one?
All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, they're both killer charts because this shows why college people with more education are more Democratic these days, and people with less education are more Republican. Okay, this explains the entire thing, because if this is all wages corrected for inflation. In other words, they're what we call constant dollars. So forget inflation. This has all been worked in. So it's like a dollar today is the same as a dollar 100 years ago when you correct for inflation. All right. So if you're not even a high school graduate, and let's face it, there's a certain number of people in our society, maybe they were too sick to finish high school. Maybe they weren't smart in book smart, but they're smart in fixing stuff. They're great. Except look what's happened to their wages over the last 40 years or so. They've gone down in real terms. They've gone down. Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons these things have happened. Technology has changed. Jobs have gone out of the United States, and we brought the workers from outside the United States in here to get the other jobs. So, of course, if you don't have but a high school graduate, okay, let's look at the most case. Most Americans actually have a high school graduate. That's the education they have, and then a few more have some college. Okay, so these two lines here that you're not seeing my what I'm trying to point to, but the ones that are the second and third from the bottom. Okay. High school graduate and some college. Okay, that's where most Americans are actually. Okay, look what their wages have done over this period of time. And this doesn't bring it all, this particular chart doesn't bring it all the way to the present, but I've seen the charts that do, and nothing has changed, right? This is exactly the same. The wages have actually been flat for people with less than a 4-year college degree for 60 years in this country after correcting for inflation. 60 years, right? So and the housing, of course, has exploded in price, and so all things are harder for people, and their wages are flat. Now, if you've got a 4-year college degree, well, your wages have gone up maybe a third in this period of time. It's not spectacular, but it's the right way. If you've got a graduate degree, oh man, you're swimming. If you're a doctor, you're doing okay. And so these people, they're going, especially the graduate degree people, but more and more of the bachelor's degree people are going into the Democratic Party. Why? Well, a couple of reasons. Of course, they're teaching sort of woke, left stuff in colleges. That's part of it. But part of it is they're satisfied with the economy. They're satisfied with the way things are. Globalism's working for them. They don't understand why it's not working for everyone. Of course, bringing more and more people from overseas, it keeps my prices. If I'm the doctor and I can get 3 guys trimming my hedges, I used to have to trim them myself, right? But now I've got Carlos and whoever and trimming them, and I'm like a rich person. So it's working for these people. That's why they've drifted into the Democratic Party, which is wanting to keep things just exactly the way they are.
Yeah,
But
it's a social club.
But it's not working for the people on the bottom. They're saying, "Hey, things are getting harder and harder for us, and why don't we get a break? Why are you bringing millions and millions of more people each year on top of us when we can't get decent jobs?" So
this is the world I came from, and it's perverse in that it's like I was there. I had an MBA, and it's like it's like at the end of the day, the MBAs aren't that much different. But once you get your foot in the door at one of these companies, you're like, oh, wow, they give me a massage and they give me frappes, and I can sit around and think that I'm saving the world instead of like shareholder value. And it becomes a social club where it's like, whoa, if I like act and think and look and pretend I believe all the same thing other people in this organization do, my star is going to rise. And that doesn't and that doesn't entertain critically examining your place in the global economy and what it does to, I mean, it's literally a social club. It's like, and part of that social club is, oh, well, the uniform you have to put on is this set of luxury beliefs.
Well, the people who can afford social clubs are people who are doing well, right?
Yeah.
So, if you got a graduate degree, you may be in the country club. I mean, what working man can be in a country club these days? But when I was a kid, it was not inconceivable, right? So it's the income inequality is getting much more dramatic in America, and in the 21st century, I think the economic theme has been that the very, very wealthiest are always going to get much wealthier because they can send capital anywhere in the world and invest it, and they can bring in people they want. They want cheaper people, they just bring them in. They want their factories to be making stuff cheaper, well, they just ship them out. They've got people to teach their kids that live in their houses with them, and they send the kids to private school. They're not worried about schools. They're not worried about the education that's not good. They're not worried about being mugged in the street. What street? They live behind gated walls. It's rotten. And then, but they think that they're the people who are the most in touch and the most moral and stand for the right things, and they like things the way they are. So how did we get Trump? This is how. This chart right here.
Yeah, out of touch, high on their own supply people. And it's like, yeah, and if a law or a regulation stands in your way, your boss could give some money to a political action committee, and maybe a reporter gets paid off or gets some access. Just self-reinforcing. It's like, yeah. Let's go to the other chart.
Okay. Now this is a real kick in the teeth. Okay, because if you follow economics, you know that America's GDP, which means gross domestic product, which is the total value of all the goods and services you produce. So it's everybody's labor and everybody's goods that we make, and it's everything we do. It's our economy. It just goes up, up, up. Since this is a 35-year chart here. It's the economy just shot out the roof, and per capita, this is how much stuff we all made per person. So it's like it doubled, is what this chart really says. It almost doubled, and so our productivity really rose. In other words, someone like me who's a researcher and a writer and the stuff I do, on average, because of computer tools and because of chat GPT and all these things, we're more productive than we were 30 years ago. But guess what? So the economic value, the pie has gotten much bigger. But what about the rewards to the people who are doing the work? Well, look, real median weekly earnings. Let's define those terms. Real means after inflation. So forget inflation. We've already figured that out for you. This is constant, okay? Median means half above, half below. This means not the average, because the averages are never accurate, because, with Musk in there, he's got hundreds of billions. So this is half. This means if you're in the big middle of the pack and your weekly earnings for full-time workers have been flat the entire time, slightly up, but mostly flat over a 30-year period, where the amount of goods and services you're producing as a worker had just exploded. Where's that money going? It's going to the ownership class. That's why there is a Musk. That's why, Musk has done it through lots of brains. I admire him. He's doing real stuff. But if you've got so much money that you're the one who can control all the circumstances, and you can just get more and more money. Every rich person I know has gotten much, much richer in this century. Much, much richer.
Yeah. Well, if the money supply is going up, you want to hold assets. And
I don't know a single person, a rich person, who's gone bust in the last 25 years. They've all gotten much richer. And so, you can't say that about working people. Any working people who've gone bust in the last 25 years? They're everywhere, right?
Yeah, everybody's paycheck to paycheck. Yeah.
Right. So, this shows that something's structurally wrong with our economy. where and I can tell you what a lot of it is. It's a lot of things, Mark. I'm not trying to do one size fits all, but a lot of it is that the fat cats can send their money anywhere, and they can send the jobs out, and they can bring replacement workers in. It's like we're being shut out of our own world. And it's not, and in my view, it's nothing to do with great replacement theory stuff about politics. It's about economics. It's about your job being replaced. That's where the money gets. And it's,
Well,
of course, if,
yeah.
if replacement was the idea, it's been spectacularly unsuccessful because immigrants come in here and turns out, they like America, and they're voting pretty conservative already. So that's been a wash. If that was the intent, it's been spectacular failure.
Well, I don't know. I'm not so sure about the last wave or two, too, right? Like the Haitian guy they got on video and stuff like that.
Well, I
But
mean,
so
of course, there's bad eggs and all of that. But I'm saying most of the story, why it's
yeah.
happening, is economics, and the politics is an afterthought or a secondary concern.
Well, so again, I'm coming from a place of Deus Vult, like righteous fury, like it's time for these wrongs to be righted. And I don't want to accuse people of intent, but I like to seek attribution. And so I'll slice and dice things until I can try and find like attribution that validates
Sure.
my hypothesis. And I got two of them, and they're different. And the first one is less tenuous. And so I titled this one "The Death of the American Dream." And so I like to use total government debt instead of GDP, because I think GDP is squishy and is like a downstream effect of probably like what is a very centrally planned economy now. It didn't used to be that way, but it is now. And I kind of look at this measure. It's like take the government debt, split it up, and then divide it by the median real income. So what that is like, take the middle of America, Joe Sixpack, and how able with his income is he at servicing his portion of the government debt. And it was like pretty stable. It was like 0.5, which means his income's twice his share of the debt. And it ticked up a little bit during the housing boom, but literally right here, something structural changed. And it happened to line up with bipartisan crisis legislation, but I think what it also happened to line up with is Ben Bernanke and zero interest rate programs and the socialization of banking losses. And what literally happened is that the average American rapidly became less capable because their wages were stagnating versus spiraling government debt. They aren't able to push on the boulder as hard as they used to be. And then rates started to rise, housing market turned around, the consumer economy came back to some extent. Trump got in office. Then COVID hit. And again, we socialized losses. We gave everybody and their mother money. We did another massive multi-trillion-dollar spending bill. And where we're at is now the middle American is 5 times less capable of paying off their share of the government debt. And now it's literally because wages, like in your chart, have completely stagnated for your average American. And so this to me is like palpable desperation of literally the engine of the economy that's holding up this government that is now foundering. It has been hollowed out. And it's like, okay, maybe it was done with good intentions. Maybe Ben Bernanke's like, well, we just got to save the economy. It doesn't matter if the billionaires are getting richer. But they could have pulled this chart and see where it was going, and nobody did.
Yeah, well, the problem is people in times of crisis convince themselves that nothing matters and that that gravity no longer applies to them, right? But the problem with that example is, gravity always applies to you. And if you throw 6 apples in the air, they're going to come back down. And if you float another $1 trillion of debt every 90 days, you're what goes up will come down, my friend. And that is our credit worthiness will be coming down. And that's absolute certainty. So people like you and me who talk about this, and I've been talking about it all my life. When it was a much lesser deal, I thought we were in danger. But my gosh, we're like the little boy that cries wolf, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, oh, you've been saying this for so long. It's not
It
true.
turns out it actually is sustainable. Like,
Yeah,
who knew, right?
forever.
Yeah.
Because no. It's
Well, what's interesting is this is a feedback loop. So it turns out it wasn't the bond vigilantes. It was pissed off middle class people that have to shop at the Dollar Tree now. That's
Yeah.
what it was. That was the feedback loop to the wealth concentration.
Yeah.
And so our democracy worked. That's an encouraging thought.
It is.
So
No,
here's another one. It might be a little bit more tenuous, but I like to look at different measures because there's different attributions here. I don't know if you've seen this one or not. This is fascinating to me. So this is the share of U.S. women married at age 45 by birth year.
right.
So if you want to compare it to real world events, you got to subtract 45 years from the event by education level.
Yeah. So we're getting to something I know a lot about. I've studied social trends around the world, and including very large measures of religious trends, because they have such a huge impact on economic trends, right? And we have the scary thing now that marriage is being more and more is the sort of the territory for the highly educated people. So you've got this weird thing of people with graduate degrees. They're in the Democratic Party, which teaches free love and transgenderism and this and that and other, all this weird stuff, and abortion on demand and all of these things. And yet the lives they practice are super conservative. They're married. They've only been married once. They have their children are well behaved. They go to school and get good grades. They would and they're living conservative lives while they're teaching this radicalism. And but the people who are at lower in the economy have caught a little bit of there's this old phrase that when the rich get a cold, the poor get pneumonia. And there's some of that to it. So it's like people have caught on that, they've caught some of the cultural stuff, but they don't have the support systems that the wealthier and more educated people sometimes have. But then also that people feel like they can't afford to get married. They can't afford to have children. They're kind of being priced out of life. And it's tragic. And more and more, the people who are less educated are also less religious. Now they may not have less belief in God, but less religious, as in they're going to church less, because also that's becoming more the province of the educated. The people most likely to be in church on a Sunday are people with graduate degrees. And aren't they supposed to be the snooty atheists? No, actually not. Their party may teach that, but that's not the way they are. And then the people, but so what happens when you start getting on a sort of a down and out spiral, and the walls start coming down on you, it's like social support systems start going by the wayside. And what is number one social support system? Your family. A family that you start and you work together, but it starts coming apart. So it shows our society's in deep, deep trouble, Mark. And this is, by the way, a worldwide trend.
Yeah.
The decline of marriage amongst people who are less educated and less affluent. And of course, it's these things it's easy to talk about and it's hard to practice, but really marriage needs to come back in a big way because it gives affluence and prosperity and stability and happiness. But when people feel like, with people who are like working 3 jobs and they've got a medical problem and the car doesn't run well because they can't afford to fix it, it's hard to have these social things. They seem like luxuries. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No,
100. Like that's what we need to return to. And the fourth turning tells us that we're going to go through a crisis so great that out of necessity, we all come together with a shared value set and rebuild institutions. It's not, it's out of necessity, it's not a prophecy. And it's like maybe it will be less than prior ones. But man, this chart to me is like a Monet. I could stare at it all day because
Yeah.
it's like, hey, it's like complicated because of the lagged year, but then it's got such a drastic like right hand turn here that you just wonder, like I itch for a simple solution to the problem here. It's like, okay, the birth year in 1940. So it's like literally did the fact that these people were born during the war, did the war change it? I don't think so. Because people that grew up in the 50s like probably had pretty good lives too. And then it's like, well, what I came up with is like we know society was becoming more individualistic. I can understand why people born in the 60s or 70s, like maybe that's where it would break, but it didn't broke way farther back. And the only thing I can come up with is that it's like, okay, if you take people born in 47 and push it forward 45 years, that's 92, that's NAFTA. And so I wonder if when did globalization begin in earnest? And were people in the prime of their career or getting married? So it's like the people between here and here were of marriageable age during NAFTA, like that's the date. But what was happening in the 80s?
Well, let's see. Tucker 27 just left a comment. Most marriages don't seem to last long these days. How would you change that? Well, actually, that's not as true as it was. Actually, marriages are lasting longer and divorces are down. Unfortunately, it's not for that good a reason. It's because marriage rates are down. And so a lot of people who would be higher risk for divorce don't kind of know that and don't get married at all. And they don't have children and they don't form families. And then if they do have children, but they don't have marriage, then the children come out with less stability, and those people are less likely yet to be able to form successful families. So in socially as well as economically, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But how to stop that? Well, first, we got to stop believing what's on the radio. We got to stop believing what's streaming on television and the morals of Hollywood, because these Hollywood people, I mean, they can afford to have low morals because they got more money. Money can cover up lots of problems. But people who work for a living can't afford that, right? And it's like, really, and this is maybe not a popular message, and maybe maybe I'm really over my skis, but it's like traditional values are really the best way to avoid poverty that there is. Traditional values. I mean, it's not the only thing, but it's something.
No, it's like, one of the top ones. So I have like a positive and negative view of this. And I think the fourth turning, again, I put a lot of stock in it, but I think I can reinforce this idea. And it's like, okay, there's probably a Venn diagram in this discussion of Christianity, like an overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And what the fourth turning tells us about Christianity isn't that we're in the middle of some historic in the last 2,000 years dechurching. It's happened a lot. There have been periods of time in our past where people were just not that religious. And what tends to happen is everybody goes through hell and they find Jesus. Like after the Civil War, the 1870s revival that birthed, a huge Methodist movement and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So people will come back to these values by necessity. And you're already starting to, like, our economy got bad enough that people dunk mercilessly on actors and actresses that come out and virtue signal about luxury beliefs now. So you might be seeing the leading edge of that. And unfortunately, I don't think mainline denomination churches are that relevant anymore or fighting this battle. But there are very healthy, traditional Catholic churches and evangelical churches that are probably going to fill a power vacuum as these other churches disintegrate. And I don't know. I think we're going to see a stark period of much higher national unity. I hope it doesn't take another civil war to get there.
Right. I hope people don't put all their faith in politics, Mark, because it's getting a political reforms that is not enough to save to say it may save the finances of America, it may save government structures, and have better defense, whatever, but it won't save the families of America. The American families are going to have to decide. They have to dig down deep and say, there's stuff more important than money, and and nothing's more important than our family relationships. And really, the way great grandma and great grandpa ran their families probably a lot more like the way our average family needs to be run today. And I don't mean that overly broad. I just mean, sticking together, facing things together. But one thing is that the men in work this is one reason marriage is declined, is that the American men are of working age, of prime working age, that is, are much less employed than they were 50,
Yeah.
60 years ago. Much less.
I love it, Jim. You're bringing it back to immigration. I love it.
Right. And part of that is because we've got some of these social programs that make it easier not to work. But a lot of it also is because we've got people who are coming in who are always going to work cheaper and cheaper. And how does that work? How does that look on the ground? Okay, so say I'm 66 years old already, and people who get a little bit up in years, there's whatever their job is, there's always this tendency is like, maybe we replace you with someone younger and cheaper, right? And what if that someone happens to be just got here from another country, and what my job is, maybe I'm a construction worker, and I'm not quite as fast as I used to be because I got a little arthritis now. And some young guy comes in and he's going to work for half my rate. He's not going to ask questions. He's going to be there every day because he's desperate. He's not even here legally. He's desperate. Why is that person? Why people have been pushed out of the jobs earlier and earlier. So people need to work later and later to support themselves because Social Security is not going to do it. And yet they get pushed out because there's so many people coming in all the time.
I think there's another pendulum there that's going to swing back. And that I worked in these organizations, and there is a inexorable push over the last 20 years to turn anything and everything into a digital product that can be outsourced to India. And the level of technology debt that is piling up is going to be so enormous. And also, I think we're going to get back to a merit economy at some point where like leadership and judgment are going to be much more valuable than understanding the latest coding language. I think that comes with kind of everything we're seeing, but I'm very optimistic that the pendulum's swinging back. I'll give you an example. It's like the slippery slope was going like that. Am I oriented correctly? And I think it's starting to go back up because Pete Buttigieg removed his pronouns from his bio. And I say that in jest, but I think we've worshipped a level of degeneracy in our political leaders and our entertainers, and I don't think that passes muster anymore. And I think the smart ones know it. The smart ones know that something is amiss, and because movies are tanking, because people open their fat mouths, and that is the start of something that could be a return to traditional values and sanity because they push too far.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the basic unit of society, what matters the most is our families. And so that where public policy really matters on this, I mean, we can't tell people they got to get married or whatever, have children, but we can make it where they can afford to get married and afford to have children. And I think Vance was right when he said at the what was it? Was it the prayer breakfast, or is it he was addressing a Catholic gathering, perhaps? But he's a Catholic prayer breakfast, maybe. But anyway, when he said the measure of a country is not how much money the country has, but how easy it is to raise a family in the country. And then he was attacked for this statement. Of course, everything he says is attacked. But
good statement.
But it's a good statement. And we've made it really hard. And people are trying, but it's like, first first we had, well, I won't even go into that subject, but it's everything that's happened in this century has made it more difficult for families to form and stay together, afford housing. We were already millions of housing units short before Biden got into office. And when he gets into office, he brings in how many millions of more people in this illegal and semi-legal, quasi-legal manipulation of the system, people we had no use for, no jobs for, and half of them are on the dole immediately. And of course, think what it's doing to the housing crisis. One third of the hotel rooms, or is it a quarter, in New York are occupied by illegal immigrants. So where do people who formerly stayed in those hotel rooms, where are they now? I mean, and as long as we have any veterans on the street, why do we allow one more illegal alien family to come into this country and stay here? What are we thinking?
Well, they're desperately trying to fund those hotels, so I can only imagine that there's a financial incentive to do so. And it's like, well, if you get a little grift and kickback on a hotel price that you don't really necessarily care what the expense is, you're going to crowd out travelers and make things more expensive for anything. You brought up housing, and I'll attack a sacred cow here. I think one of the things we didn't talk about that has made life so horrible for people is credit expansion. My parents were born in 47 and 49, and I think they're on like the leading edge of people that got a 15-year mortgage. It's like we've created an entire industry built on like this ridiculous concept that somebody's going to own a house for 30 years and pay it off, and that somehow a 2.5% rate accurately represents their credit risk, which it doesn't. So all of this, piled on top of HELOCs, piled on top of car loans, piled on top of credit card debt, is oppressive. And it is one more way in which wealth is concentrated at the top. I would love to see it revert somehow, and there's probably some things you could do, like maybe mandating that large investment banks or privately held organizations like Goldman Sachs used to be. I don't know. So there's less credit appetite, but it's got to get rolled back too if we want to have single income households with the economy we have now.
Many fundamental things have gone wrong, and many fundamental reforms need to be made.
Yeah, well, okay, that's a good response to that. Let's see if we got any other questions of stuff we didn't cover. And Jim, also, is there stuff you wanted to talk about that we didn't hit?
Man, I don't know. We talked about a lot of stuff. I mean, we should also talk about legal immigration. It's all messed up too, right? It's completely hosed up. So more than half of all our legal visas are given to people who are extended family members, and then what we call family chain migration, right? So it's people will tell you, people who are big on immigration, they'll tell you, oh, we must have immigration to stay number one in the economy and to chase after China and all of this stuff. Well, and yet most of the visas are actually given out because you're some brother-in-law. So maybe we needed the first person for some job. This person comes in, they get their citizenship, and now they begin sponsoring all their extended family chain or extended family system of, extended family members. And there's a chain that started because those people come in and they start their own chain. So, you get adult siblings, you get spouses, and parents come in, and so one immigrant we wanted could result in hundreds of people that are not chosen by us. They just happen to be related. And so they automatically get in under our crappy current law. That has to be changed, right? That's very, very important to change that. Also, this H-1B thing, it's so terrible. We have so many computer programmers and tech workers who are members of Numbers USA, and they feel like they can't get a breath of air because people are being brought in from overseas, working cheaper, from India primarily. And it's so unfair because if you hear people talk in the newspapers, the business people, it's like, oh, we need the best and the brightest. Are the people being brought in under H-1B visas the best and the brightest? No, they're just code slingers.
Yeah, I can attest personally, after
Right.
seeing a 99% Indian Sunnyvale, California Walmart engineering headquarters. And the way it works is the people at the top say, you know what? We need to save money on engineering. And
Right.
so they hire a senior vice president of technology from India who says, oh, yeah, I can set up an operation for you. So they set up an operation and then they say, oh, it's like too far. It's on the other side of the world. So it's like, all right, well, like let's ship over a couple hundred. At least it'll be cheaper. And then what happens is those people hire almost exclusively Indian people in the US. It just happens. I mean, I don't know why. And then all of a sudden you get a 99% Indian building. And whether it was just the company I worked for or whether it's others, I can tell you that the quality assurance and the integrity to solve problems the right way is not there. And so they have to hire more people. And the ones that are in the US aren't really working for that much cheaper, if at all. And so what they wind up with is they wind up paying through the nose, not hiring domestically born labor, and like messing up customer experiences. I saw it firsthand, and it was like the most blatant, naive, like it was just a horrible business decision, and they're living with it. And I don't even know if they realize how horrible, but they keep hiring H-1Bs like with both fists. It's crazy.
Yeah. So H-1Bs are 3-year visas that are automatically renewed for another 3 years. So it's a 6-year program, right? So we bring in, I don't know what, 60, 70, 80,000 new ones a year, and they're here 6 years. So actually we've got like a million or two of these people.
Yeah.
And then when they come to the end of it, they're trying to get sponsored for an employment visa. So they really become the many of them who succeed in doing that become they become legal permanent immigrants. And so, what started off as a temporary person brought in to get us over the hump becomes another permanent person in America. And we're on our way to having kind of a foreign dominated tech sector. I mean, why? I mean, we got a lot of smart people in America. We don't need the best and the brightest. We are the best and the brightest. We've got 300 and we've got 300 and what is it, 40 million people here. We're the third highest population on earth. We don't need more people. We are populated.
Well, what's funny is they don't need more tech workers. I don't have a tech background, and I went in and I just applied common sense, root cause, and corrective action. And like the concept of, problems should be solved for real, and accountability requires sunlight to be a disinfectant. And that was like nails on a chalkboard there, because it's like, oh, somebody coded this. Oh, it's a problem. Oh, sweep it under the rug real quick. And it's like, meanwhile, you just canceled 50,000 e-commerce orders and cost probably millions of future lifetime value. So this is like tangentially just hitting on this concept of wokeness and merit based. And so wokeness, in my opinion, is a symptom of what we could bring it back to Bernanke. I think Bernanke bucks helped enable, along with these luxury beliefs and this like upper class cult, companies to just not be responsible for merit-based outcomes. And you can fire your DEI department, but it ain't going to fix the fact that the doors fall off of Boeing. And I don't think it's because they hired one more minority person that couldn't pass the test. It's because they have an entire culture that doesn't understand quality assurance.
Well, there are a lot of things going wrong, right? You get what you pay for. When Americans' business is so focused on cutting costs that they bring in workers that will put it out the stuff, but where's the quality? It's so the problem is the big bosses have turned reality upside down. They said, oh, we need to bring in the best and brightest, but that's not their intention at all. Their intention is to bring the cheapest and most the easiest to push around. And that's what they do. And that's why doors fall off of airplanes, because we've got the wrong focus. And, really, this idea needs to be challenged that Americans aren't smart enough. I mean, who's smarter than Americans? I mean, where did this stuff all get invented? The United States of America. We didn't bring in our technology. We made our technology. Did you know only half of STEM, a STEM worker, right, is someone who's got a degree in science, technology, engineering, or math, STEM. Only half of America's STEM college graduates even work in a STEM field.
Yeah,
Why?
I'm a mechanical engineer.
Yeah,
I'm a pollster. Yeah.
yeah, right. There you go. There you go, Mark Mitchell. So why do we need to bring in people from the outside when we've already got millions of people who we've got surplus? We got millions of surplus engineers here. And we don't want, because we have a lack of brilliance, we have a lack of people working for cheap enough. And that's all it is. It's as when you like to talk about people lying, they're lying. This is the biggest lie of all, that Americans aren't smart enough to do our own jobs and our own work. Hey, we invented this stuff. We invented the integrated circuit.
Yeah.
We invented all of it. So don't tell me we need somebody who's a code monkey to come in and work the system. We can do it all. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have some immigration. We should, even to keep up our population, we will need some immigration. I'm not against immigration. I'm not against immigrants. I love Hispanic people. I wrote a book about them. I'm very positive. You read it. It's very positive about them. It's just that but when it gets to the point where we're bringing in people because they're cheaper to displace Americans, then it's perverted. When we get the idea that, we need to bring in people because they're smart and we're not, then that's it's perverted, and it's not true. It's a lie done to make the rich richer. It's not done to help you and me, and we need to stop listening to that, and we need to say, hey, we're going to reform immigration to work for the interest of the American people. If it's not working for our interest, whose interest is it working for?
Well, I think the winds are changing. I'll tell you what, that tweet I made about people Googling criminal defense lawyers in Washington, D.C. got retweeted by Bill Ackman, of all people. So it's like, I think a new wave, and he's been around, he's been a corporate leader forever, but it's like the predominant corporate culture might be affected by what they see on X, because Elon can come in and clean up Twitter and people can say, all right, that's an anomaly. But if Elon comes in with a vastly different leadership style and cleans up the United States federal government, people are going to take notice. And I would love to work for a consultancy that goes and does that for some of these messed up companies, man. Can you imagine how fun of a job that would be, Jim?
Oh, no. Well, I mean, America's got to be a country again where it's possible to solve our problems, right? And it's we've had so many problems just build up, and we couldn't seem to solve any of them. And here's why we need bipartisanship, Mark. It's because if we don't work together, we're not going to have able to pass laws that solve any of our problems. And it's not enough to have just executive orders. It's not enough just to have Trump, because Trump will go away after a while, and then someone else on the other side will get elected, and they'll undo everything unless we pass laws. So that's what we're focused on in Numbers USA, passing laws to reform immigration to make it work for America. And if you want to help us, you don't have to you don't have to send us money. You just have to go to numbersusa.com, join us, and we'll show you what to do to start pushing Congress around. Make them do our will.
I'm just putting this up for somebody asked about the Doge poll. Yeah, Numbers USA, like I said before, nonpartisan institution, which is very different than bipartisan. And they're looking out for the middle class. They're looking out for people who have been affected by immigration. They love polling, as I can attest to. And so very stand-up guys. And it's part of DC you haven't heard about. I think it's a lot of people are painting with a broad brush, me included, about the folks involved. And it's like, no, Jim's part of a group of people that have also been affected by this, because our parties should be working together in a healthy manner, trying to use research, trying to figure out the best outcomes for the people that voted for them. And that's the part that's broken. And so he's on the same side as the boulder as us, pushing to try and save this representative democracy. And so please go to Numbers USA, follow them. Love to have Jim back on again. Do we have any last minute questions here? We've covered literally everything, and I love it. And also follow Jim on Twitter personally. Jim, what's your handle?
Jim Robb DC. Jim Robb ROBB DC. Jim Robb DC. Yeah, please follow me. I put out some interesting stuff on immigration and some other stuff about life and but mostly immigration, because immigration. I like to say to people, immigration is not the most important issue. It's the issue that decides all the other issues, though, because it affects so many things.
Well, I think it's the one that put us here too, because everybody always says the economy is the number one issue. But there was something different about this time, I can tell you what, because everybody got super inflamed. And it's like, okay, well, if you pour spiraling debt and inflation crisis on top of a massive border invasion that's taking everybody's jobs, that's how you get a populist uprising. And people were telling the Democrats they didn't listen. The Republicans, watched it kind of happen. And here we are. And this is going to change both parties in a very meaningful way, and probably the course of American, if not near-term human history. Like, who knows, right?
Right. This could be very big. There's never been, I don't know, I can't think of a time in the history of democracy in any country where you've had a guy like Musk brought in and said, oh, we've got a guy here. He happens to be the smartest guy in the country and an immigrant. Credit where credit's due, and we're going to put him in and have him look into everything and tell us who's crooked, where the crooks are, and where the money's being wasted, and we're going to clean it all up. I mean, I've never heard talk like this in my lifetime. I've never heard about it in any other country. Usually it's that political leaders can only affect things around the edges because that administrative state is steady and is resistant to any change. So it's something really different's happening this time, and I'm glad to see it.
Decades of people just waxing philosophical about the debt. Oh, it's so hard. Oh, there's no good choices. Oh,
right. Yeah. Like we're so helpless. We've never been helpless. We've just been had an implosion of will. And I wanted to say something. This is a little lesson from history. So England invented the Industrial Revolution, right? I mean, we're the inheritors of it. We're the ones who sort of got us into the 20th century, into the telephone and the electricity, the movies, jet airplane, all of that was, but phase one was England, right? The railroads and mass manufacturing, etc. But something happened in England around 1860s. Their economy started slowing its growth and they sort of developed a kind of hardening of the arteries, and they became very conservative. It was always hard in England to change things, and they had that burst of energy for the Industrial Revolution, and then they just sort of slowed to a halt, and they've never grown as fast since, right? Well, this started happening to America too. This is what happened in the 20th century. As the 20th century started getting toward the end, sort of the 60s, the 70s, 80s, where we became kind of the hardening of the arteries. We became less flexible. It's like we couldn't solve our problems anymore. We couldn't build stuff anymore. We had so many regulations. We started looking like Europe. And maybe we have a chance to break out of that. Maybe we have a chance to learn something and become a younger country again, more vital. I'm excited about it. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. I'm sure there'll be mistakes, probably lots of them, but we got to do some things. We got to change some things.
We will come out on the other side of whatever this is fundamentally changed, and we're all going to live to see it. That's what's wild. It's like we were born too late to, conquer the seas and born too early to explore Mars. But like we literally get to see the course of human history altered in a meaningful way. It's really wild because this is like an experiment in a new form of governance, and it's awfully crying shame to see it end after barely more than 250 years. Really sad. Couldn't even make it like a little over a quarter of what Rome pulled out, and we were by far a better setup. So I think it would be great if we figured out in a way that we could carry forward into the future of humanity How do you fix wide-scale mass lying and corruption? We might see it.
Fun.
All right, Jim, one last time. Where do you want people to go? What do you want them to do?
I
And
want
thanks
them
so much
to
for
go to
coming.
numbersusa.com, and I want them to hit join us and get involved. Just sign up. It's free. And we will tell you everything you need to know and tell you everything you need to do to make Congress pass the right laws to make immigration work for Americans. And I want them to follow me at Jim Robb DC, Jim Robb, ROBB, Jim Robb DC, and on Twitter. And we'll stay in touch and keep that good information coming at people.
If you've learned something, please follow us at rasmussenreports.com, Rasmussen_poll at Twitter. Follow us on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Mark_R_Mitchell at Twitter. And thanks for watching.